Hey, welcome to U.S. History. Today we're going to talk about Jim Crow and the early civil rights movement in America. So, let me give you some context to Jim Crow and the early civil rights movement. So, the United States has just got done fighting the Civil War, which comes to an end in 1865, and there are some amendments passed that are known as the Civil War Amendments slash Reconstruction Amendments, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. The 13th Amendment ends slavery. The 14th Amendment uh, says that these newly freed men have citizenship. Notice I said freed men, not women. And that the 15th Amendment says that these newly freed men have the right to vote and can't be prevented from voting based on previous servitude or race. These amendments really upset white Southerners because they feel like they're going to lose power and they don't like it. So they're trying to find ways to disenfranchise these newly freed men and take away their rights to participate in government. And it's all going to start with this event here. Plessy versus Ferguson, 1896. You'll notice that there's a Captain America shield. This is very important. This is a very, very important event because you need to know it. This is what really gets, what really starts the civil rights movement in 1896. This gentleman, you see his picture here on the left, Homer Plessy. He's going to sue for the right to be able to sit in the front of the train in Louisiana. All right, but what Plessy versus Ferguson does is establishes segregation as legal as long as blacks had access to their own separate but equal facilities. So Plessy versus Ferguson says that you can separate the races, you can separate blacks from whites, as long as everything is equal. This opens the door for white Southerners to create what are known as Jim Crow laws. All right, it makes it perfectly legal for them to segregate and keep blacks from participating in the government process of voting, running for public office, things like that. All right, so Plessy versus Ferguson set the stage for years of racial inequality and segregation in America. And as you can see, you look at the picture of Homer Plessy here on the left compared to the newspaper drawing that you see on the right. Completely different view of Mr. Plessy. Mr. Plessy in the picture. Mr. Plessy is a mixed man. However, can you really tell that he's mixed? Not really, but if you look at the cartoon, look how it portrays him. Keep that in mind. Alright? The idea that being any percentage of black automatically made you black in America. There was no, oh, well, they're half white, so no, that didn't exist. And once again, Plessy versus Ferguson set the stage for years of racial inequality and segregation in America. It's going to allow white Southerners to pass Jim Crow laws. All right, here we go. So, Jim Crow laws. All right. The definition of Jim Crow laws is the required segregation in most southern states. The purpose is to keep blacks at the bottom of society and separate them from whites. So, what Jim Crow said that Jim Crow made segregation to the point where blacks had their own water fountains from whites. Blacks had their own schools separate from whites. Their own hospitals separate from whites. Things like that. So it made segregation that much more easier to put into place especially in places in the South. Examples of Jim Crow laws: voting restrictions, poll taxes. All right, making these newly freed men pay taxes in order to vote. Well, African Americans couldn't afford those taxes because they had a hard time finding jobs. The grandfather clause: if your grandfather voted, then you could vote. Well, these newly freed men Their grandfathers never voted. They were slaves. And then literacy tests. Especially early on, they were difficult for African Americans because when they were slaves, they weren't allowed to read or be educated. And there were also some unspoken rules of Jim Crow as well. For example, if a black man saw a white person walking on the same side of the sidewalk as them, the black person was expected to step off of the curb into the road to let the white person pass by. All right, so that's Jim Crow for you. Legal segregation in the South. All right, and disenfranchisement of blacks and keeping them from participating in the government, the process of voting and running for public office. Here we go. Notice that there's another Captain America shield. Voting rights in the early 20th century. So, once again, Southern legislators used several methods to keep African Americans from voting. Once again, it was all about controlling African Americans and keeping them at the bottom of society so that white Southerners didn't feel like they were losing control or power. And the way they did this was they prevented them from participating in government. They prevented them from prevented newly freed men from participating in governments by preventing them from being able to vote. Once again, putting in things like poll taxes in places, making you pay taxes in order to vote. Literacy and citizenship tests. And then ultimately being threatened with the violence. All right? These are ways that white Southerners kept these newly freed men from participating in government. Keep that in mind. So, once again, you see there's a Captain America symbol shield right there. The KKK, the Ku Klux Klan. All right. The Klan really, its birth is right after the Civil War. They're trying to keep these newly freed men from voting, and they do this through, call it as you see it, terrorism. All right. Burning crosses in their yards. Lynching African Americans at an alarming rate. You see that it says the birth of a nation led to a resurgence of the Klan. The Birth of a Nation is a film that Woodrow Wilson allowed to be showed at the White House. And it was about the Klan and how the glory of being a Klan and the pride of being a member of the Klan. This led to the resurgence of the Klan. All right. The Klan really used fear and violence to create obstacles to prevent African Americans from voting. Right? And one of the biggest things they used was lynching, hanging African Americans from trees, things like that. Here we go. Some of the early leaders of the Civil Rights Movement, Booker T. Washington, W.E.B. Du Bois, and Marcus Garvey. Now, Booker T. Washington believed that African Americans should go to school, learn a trade, like learn how to be a mechanic, a construction worker, things like that. Learn skills that involve them working with their hands, and by that show white America that they are hard workers and can be trusted. And when white America was ready, they would give these African Americans civil rights. All right? He was willing to wait until white America was accepting of African Americans. W.E.B. Du Bois, on the other hand, didn't see it that way. All right? He felt that we've had segregation for 400 years and we want civil rights now. And he felt like the way to achieve civil rights was through what he called the talented 10th. And he felt that 10%, the top 10% of the African American community should become doctors, lawyers, scientists, things like that, and then lead the rest of the population in demanding their civil rights now. A big thing about W.E.B. Du Bois, he is a founding member of the NAACP, or the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. All right. back to Booker T. Washington, he also founded the Tuskegee Institute, which is a historically black college / university where lots of African Americans went to learn trades. All right, and then probably the extreme of both Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois, Marcus Garvey. Marcus Garvey didn't want any acceptance from white America. He felt like African Americans should work hard, get their money, get money, save up, and go back to Africa. All right. So these are your leading leaders of the African American civil rights movement at this moment in time during the early 1900s. Some other notable leaders: George Washington Carver, scientific researcher. He's the gentleman that created peanut butter. All right, and he also had lots of other inventions involving peanut butter and other plants. Madam C.J. Walker became a successful businesswoman and entrepreneur. All right, and she used her wealth and influence to push for civil rights. And then you'll see the Captain America symbol once again. Ida B. Wells, she is a muckraker. All right, remember especially during the Progressive era, muckrakers are people who are journalists who are going to show the bad parts of society and try to bring about change. Well, Ida B. Wells is going to write a book, and she's going to show the rest of America what's going on in the South with lynchings. The lynchings of African Americans by white Southerners and the Klan.